Welcome to this June 27th edition of The Truth. I'm John Gordon. A lot to talk about today, including the housing bill, the SAVE Act, the Iran war, communism infecting America, Mike Lindell and election integrity, and Scott Pressler visited South Dakota. We've got interviews with Joe Persaud. He's with the American Transit Insurance Company in New York City. We're talking to him about free bus rides. Dr. Andrew Fox, an author, priest, and pastor, and his book, Truth in the Age of Applause. It's a great interview. And Michael Pack, he's a filmmaker, and we're talking to him about his op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal, The Lockdown Dissidents. All right, so we thought we had a real win in Congress when they passed the Affordable Housing Act. This bill limited the number of houses that big corporations could buy. It effectively capped how many homes they could own, because the fact of the matter is big corporations are moving into communities and they're buying up and edging out a lot of would-be homeowners. They go in and they compete for the house. They up the price. They say, hey, we'll close without a home inspection report and we'll close in 10 days. The seller obviously is ecstatic, but then the house falls into the hands of these corporations, and the would-be individual homeowners are frozen out. But then what these companies do is they rent the very house that they were competing against a homeowner on, and they rent it back to the individual who lost out on the bid. So Congress stepped in. They did the right thing. They capped the number of houses that institutions could own. I hate government interference. I'm for free markets, but in this case, I think it is a pragmatic and the right thing to do to preserve this notion of individual home ownership in America. And it's an affordability issue, because when you have companies like BlackRock coming in and they bid up the price of a house, individuals can't compete. So it just makes it more expensive for everyone, but it also makes the cost of the rent go up when the big bad corporation turns around and rents it to the very people that were trying to buy it. So I felt like that this was a good bill. It also smoothed permitting processes, or mandated ironing out permitting processes so they were easier. The bill encouraged local communities to ease up on some stringent zoning provisions. They also sped up the EPA's approval of alternative building products, one of which I just learned about in the last week or 10 days. A company in North Carolina grows these weeds, and the weed is not weed like you smoke. Stop it. Tall weeds like grow in the field, and they have a rigid type structure to them. So this company, instead of cutting down trees, they plant the weeds, they let them mature, then they harvest them, then they take them to their plant and they compress them, and the end product is just like plywood, except it's more consistent and it doesn't have blemishes, and it's uniform in terms of its structure. In other words, it doesn't bend or expand with moisture, and it costs a lot less, or it certainly will if they can get to scale. So that's a real inventive product, and there's so many more like it, but the regulations and the path to getting a real product past the EPA and the FTC and all the companies that have their hand in the process make it virtually impossible to get new innovative products to market. So this housing bill addressed all of that. I thought it was a really good piece of legislation. It passed with bipartisan support. Trump was about to sign it. And then I guess he had second thoughts. He said, nope, I'm not going to do it. I'm not unless the Senate will attach the SAVE Act to it. So here's Trump's take on the Housing Act.
If the housing bill that you didn't sign today, if it came to your desk...
I said I'm not signing the housing bill. I want to see what happens with SAVE. Look, the housing bill is... Housing, I made billions of dollars with housing. I know housing better than anybody, maybe anywhere. It's all about the interest rate. Lower the interest rates, you can have all the housing you want. But you have to understand, I don't want to hurt people that own houses too. These people, for the first time in their lives, they have valuable houses. They become rich. I don't want to hurt them either. Sir, what you want to do is what good for everyone? Get the interest rates down.
So, I mean, Trump does understand housing, and he does understand affordability. Trump is doing what Trump does. He's negotiating. He's leveraging Congress in order to be able to push through the SAVE Act. And he went to Capitol Hill to twist arms. I'm not sure how well that really went, but here's what he had to say about the SAVE Act.
Would you be open to a compromise measure that had provisions of the SAVE Act into a reconciliation bill?
Not really. No, the SAVE Act should be, it's not compromise. It's voter ID, it's proof of citizenship, and it's also the mail-in ballots. We want mail-in ballots for the military if they're away. We want them for people that are ill or people that are in some form handicapped or have a hard time or people even that are on vacation. I'm open to that. But mail-in ballots, you have to vote because we have a lot of rigged elections.
And would you veto the housing bill?
And then we added in men in women's sports is a no-no. No men in women's sports and no transgender mutilization of our children. These are 99% issues, and we have to do it. We have to protect. Look at what's gone on in Los Angeles and California. The vote still hasn't been counted. What's it, 2 weeks now? It still hasn't been counted. And I don't know Spencer Pratt, but I watched him, and he was doing really nicely. All of a sudden, he's out. And I said he was going to be out because he was doing well. And then a week later, they started saying, oh, he's starting to lose favor. He's starting to lose. I said, they just rigged the election.
Well, I mean, how could you deny that? Spencer Pratt was doing extremely well. He was really getting traction. He's an attractive guy. He's a funny guy. And he mocked Karen Bass unmercifully. And in my mind, he came in second. And the Bass camp and the Dems knew that in a head-on, one-on-one election, Karen Bass is probably toast. So they played games. They rigged the election. They put the number 3 person in number 2, so Spencer Pratt can't run against Karen Bass one-on-one. And that's what's happening around the country, folks. And the citizens of this country have to stand up and push back on it. They just cannot allow this to keep happening. And otherwise, we're going to lose our country. I firmly believe that. Somebody else who believes that is Scott Presler. You may recall that he's the guy from Pennsylvania who went all over the state registering new voters and organizing precincts. And he delivered Pennsylvania for Trump. And it's a major swing state. In 2020, it contributed toward Trump losing the election. And we clearly believe that Pennsylvania, like Georgia and Arizona and some others, Wisconsin, Michigan, were rigged. Those 7 swing states had all sorts of election irregularities occur in them. And Scott Presler said, okay, we're going to play honest. We're going to play fair. We're not going to do what they do. We're not going to cheat. We're just going to go engage in grassroots politics. And we're going to go back to the basics. We're going to register voters and turn them out. And register voters and turn them out. He did. Well, he's also been a firm and staunch election integrity advocate. And so he, like a lot of people, are really mad at John Thune. Put me in that camp. I mean, this is an 80-20 issue for American citizens. 80% of Americans want the SAVE Act to pass. So you've got to ask yourself, why are some of the Republicans in the United States Senate opposed to it? I don't even have a good answer for you, unless the elections in their state are rigged and they don't want to have to compete in a fair election. Fact of the matter is, I just don't know. I can't get my head around it. It's so bizarre to me. It is really hard for me to comprehend it. But Scott Presler, knowing that John Thune was going to be making campaign appearances or actually attending town halls in South Dakota during the recess, he just decided to buy himself a plane ticket and go out, and he tried to attend the GOP convention, which Thune was speaking at. Well, he didn't get a very warm reception. In fact, here's a clip of him having a little bit of an altercation with the sergeant at arms.
Hey guys, this is Scott Presler. I'm here at the South Dakota State Convention. I have a ticket, and they are saying that I can't come in. So we're going to find out very shortly why I am not being allowed as one of the biggest supporters of President Donald J. Trump.
I'm big on Facebook too, and I'm the asshole saying you can't come in because guess what? You're posting this little piss and moan session on Facebook. So you just get the hell out of here. Thank you.
Ooh. You see how the grassroots are welcomed in Senate Majority Leader Thune's territory. Interesting, my friends.
Well, to me, that guy demonstrated his self-fulfilling description of himself. He didn't last long. The party chairman actually apologized to Scott Presler. He said, quote, "I want to personally apologize for how things were handled tonight at the South Dakota GOP convention. Matt Bruner has been relieved of his duties as the sergeant of arms for the convention. The GOP should know by now that peaceful speech is welcome." So good for Scott Presler and good for the First Amendment that was the outcome. It's about time that the grassroots and ordinary people get a break that comes their way. There's good reason that we want the SAVE Act. And President Trump felt so strongly about it that he went to Capitol Hill this week and met with Republican senators. It got pretty dicey, we're told, but he went and basically confronted the Senate, the Republican senators, on their vote relative to the Iran war. They've tried to limit his power because there is no declaration of war. And he gave him an earful on the SAVE Act. Here he is with John Thune, the majority leader.
The war is going very well. As you know, we're winning by a lot. Iran is making very big concessions. We'll see what happens, but it's been very, very, very powerful. It's going very, very well. Go ahead.
Buying a home is unattainable for so many Americans. Is this election legislation more important to you than resolving the housing crisis?
This is every election's important. We're doing very well. They want a lot of communists to come in. I'm saying it a little bit differently, but the people that they're pushing are communists, and this country is not going to have communists. Thank you very much.
Well, that is a really important topic that President Trump identified. And I'll tell you why it matters. Because in New York, Mamdani endorsed candidates won in a clean sweep. So check this out. Assemblywoman Claire Valdez won over Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso. I think he had been in office for years. He was no conservative, but Claire Valdez is a communist, an avowed communist. In the 10th district, congressional district, another Mamdani candidate, City Controller Brad Lander. This one really surprised me. He beat incumbent Dan Goldman. Now, I don't know. I can't get too upset about that one. I would rather have my dog in Congress rather than Dan Goldman. So I don't know what Brad Lander will accomplish or how much of an influence he'll be in Congress, but I'd almost be willing to let this guy serve just to get rid of Dan Goldman, who I thought was one of the most despicable members of Congress. If you watch him in committees, everything he does is anti-Trump, anti-common sense, and he just doesn't tell the truth. He spins things so bad that they just equate to untruthfulness. Then Representative Adriano Espaillat, he'd been in Congress for over 10 years. He got defeated by Desiriliza, I can't pronounce her name, Avilia Chevalier. She is an avowed communist. And it's one of the biggest upsets that happened in this election cycle. Espaillat had been in Congress, as I said, over 10 years. And all three of these candidates are expected to be able to win in the general election come November. So that's why election integrity is so important. And that's why stopping this beginnings of communism starting to come into our country. And I think it is really concerning. And as so do a lot of other people, like Donald Trump. He posted on Truth Social just a couple of days ago, the communists are finally making their move. I've been waiting and preparing for this for a long time. It's easy to be a communist. All you have to do is say, I'll give you everything. But that means you're taking it away from other people who've actually earned it. Over thousands of years, the ideology has not worked once, and now the game is on. Enjoy watching President Donald J. Trump. So I'm not sure what he's got up his sleeve, but them's fighting words, if you ask me, and I can't wait to see it unplay or play out. I think it's high time. So Jim Jordan, he weighed in on the influx of communists into the Congress.
It is really sad. The once great party of FDR and JFK is now this Democrat, socialist, anti-Israel party.
Speaking of JFK, he warned us about communism over 65 years ago.
Senator Kennedy, on another subject, communism is so often described as an ideology or a belief that exists somewhere other than in the United States. Let me ask you, sir, just how serious a threat to our national security are these communist subversive activities in the United States today?
Well, I think they're serious. I think it's a matter that we should continue to give great care and attention to. We should support the laws which the United States has passed in order to protect us from those who would destroy us from within. We should sustain the Department of Justice in its efforts and the FBI, and we should be continually alert. I think if the United States is maintaining a strong society here in the United States, I think that we can meet any internal threat. The major threat is external and will continue.
So this is an ongoing battle that we have to wage, and the American people have got to stand firm that we are not going to allow this country to become socialist and communist. We're way down the road as it is in the context of socialism, and we need to stand firm and stand together and say, I don't care what your politics is, but we're not going to allow socialism and communism to infect this country. Today's studio is sponsored, as you well know, by Bone Frog Coffee. If you grind through the day like I do, you need a perfect pick-me-up without the jitters, get some Bone Frog Coffee. It's veteran-owned, founded by retired Naval SEAL Tim Cruikshank as a tribute to his fallen teammates in the Naval Special Warfare community. Each bag tells a story and gives a peek behind the curtain of special ops. If you don't already know it, the Bone Frog is a sacred symbol of the SEAL teams that represent those that have given their lives in combat. and is a reminder of the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms and the American way of life. Every bag premium, small batch roasted from top shelf Arabica beans, smooth, low acid, no Robusta junk. Think bold blends like Frogman Dark Roast or the classic Bone Frog Medium. Tastes like freedom in a cup. And here's the real deal. A chunk out of every sale goes straight to helping SEAL vets and Gold Star families. They are aiming to raise $500,000 and donate it to those causes. And that is Coffee with a Cause. Yeah, it's not a slogan. It's brotherhood brewed daily. Head to Bone Frog Coffee, snag some K-Cups, whole bean, or merchandise, and use the program or the promo code TRUTH and get a nice discount on your order. Start your day like I do. Fuel up, stay sharp, and remember, service before self. Support our vets and thank Bone Frog for sponsoring our studio. Check them out now at www.bonefrogcoffee.com. So, if we don't protect our elections, it'll become easier for these fringe elements to invade our electoral process. And this week, Dominion dropped its $1.3 billion lawsuit against Mike Lindell, who had the courage to speak out about his concerns about the machines and their use in the 2020 election. And Lindell has worked tirelessly for this cause, and he maintains that he spent $20 million in legal fees fighting the Dominion lawsuit. And just out of left field, out of nowhere, they dropped the lawsuit. It'll be interesting to see whether Lindell turns around and sues them for his attorney's fees. Personally, I hope he does. But this is what he had to say about computers in elections.
Well, it's every election. It isn't just the 2020. The 2020, everybody, was just the most important election, I believe, in history, because this was it exposed everything. Over the last 5 years, we've learned so much. Our president, our great president, learned so much. I've told him many times, if they would have flipped it back then to Donald Trump, we'd have lost our country forever. All this had to be revealed. It had to go down just the way it's playing out, everybody. And this isn't, they asked me after when Donald Trump won the 2024 election, one of their little snot reporters from NBC, I think they picked her to be their spokesman. She comes up to me and she says, Mike, your friend won the election. Was this election stolen? And I looked at her and I said, you guys know what I've been fighting for. And I said, you also know I don't trust any elections ever done with electronic voting machines, ever. And, and Elon Musk put this out. That's the summer of 24. He says, here's a guy, a tech guy, a genius going, we can't use computers in elections. You cannot. You can't put it down where a few people can cheat to, steal our country.
Well, the Georgia legislature did just the right thing. They passed a law that the QR code that is on the Georgia ballot had to be removed from the ballot no later than July 2026. That was a monumental piece of legislation designed to ensure that Georgia elections are free, fair, and safe. So, what did they do? They called a special session of the legislature that just concluded last week. It cost about $400,000. And what did the people of Georgia get out of that special session? No redistricting, no meaningful legislation. There was a lot of grandstanding and speeches, all designed to make people aspiring for higher office look good, at least to no one else, at least to themselves, because that's what they thought. And this special session accomplished nothing. Oh, well, no, it did accomplish one thing. They voted to kick the can down the road on removing the QR code from the Georgia ballot until 2028. That folks, means that the QR code, which is non-verifiable, it's where your ballot is digitized. And I've asked people, I'm like, why don't we? Ballots are now the subject of open records in Georgia. You can do an open records request and get ballot images, or maybe the actual ballot. I'm not sure how the law is written. I think you get the actual ballot, probably a copy of it. But I'm like, why don't you get a freshman at Georgia Tech to hack the QR code and see whether what's in it is the same as what was scored on the ballot? Because you get both. I mean, you get the ballot that you score, and that then gets translated into a QR code. Folks, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. My company, Gordon Document Products in Atlanta, actually sells scanners that can read documents. And we also sell software that can read those documents and interpret them. So you don't need a QR code to be able to count. I mean, all you have to do is put the ballots into a scanner, and with our software, which we actually sell to colleges and schools to score multiple choice exams. And that's what a ballot is. It's nothing but a multiple choice document. And so the scanner that we sell, scanners, and the software could read those ballots in a nanosecond and tabulate every precinct in Georgia probably by 8 o'clock. It's not a big deal. So that begs the question, why do legislators insist on leaving the QR code on the ballot? Well, I know what I think. I know what I suspect. And I think our listeners probably are right there with me. Get rid of the damn QR code. It's Brad Raffensperger and Gabe Sterling 2.0. And there's something really bad going on in Georgia with our elections. At least we haven't put people in prison yet. I mean, I think about what they did to Tina Peters in Colorado. She actually did what I'm suggesting, and she hacked I guess somebody's machine. I don't know who the manufacturer was. And so the constitutional officers or somebody in the state decided that she was guilty of a felony, and they put this woman in jail for over 3 years until President Trump pardoned her. Now, her sentence was state ordered. It had no legal effect, but it certainly had the persuasive effect, and they let Tina Peters out of jail. If any of our listeners have a connection with Tina Peters, please introduce us. We'd love to get her on The Truth. We're working on it, but if anybody has an in, I'd appreciate your help. Just email me, johngordontruth@gmail.com, on that or any other matter that's on your mind. We read them, we respond to them, and we really take note of what you tell us. So, the 2020 election, I think that what Mike Lindell said, that it was one of the most important elections. It was an historic election, but for all the wrong reasons, because it was stolen in a huge, multifaceted way. In fact, a report has been written. It's an 800-page report called The 2020 Election, an Attack on U.S. Critical Infrastructure. And they go through and they list 10 areas of our elections that are hackable or capable of being manipulated or changing them so that they're not reliable. Voter rolls, ballot integrity, QR codes, vote tally integrity, record retention and destruction, analysis of election board findings, and system certification. There's a case in Georgia in federal court, Raffensperger versus Curling, or I guess it's Curling versus Raffensperger, where the judge said these machines are not reliable, but there's not enough time between now and the 2020 election to do anything about it. So here we are, 6 years later, we're still using the same unreliable computers and the damn QR codes, and the legislature should be punished. I'm telling you, those people in the legislature who voted to keep the QR codes as part of the ballot should not be returned to office. To me, it's a red line. It is an automatic disqualification in my mind for anyone wishing to serve office in the state of Georgia. Ladies and gentlemen, do your part. Go to the polls and vote them out. Do not return them as your state legislators. I think what they're doing is against our U.S. Constitution. They are depriving us of our franchise. That's the foundation of our republic. You take the vote away, you take our republic away. And I don't know what's going on. I really don't. But it just befuddles me that our elected individuals, once they voted to remove the QR code, would vote to leave them on as part of our election system for another 2 years. And you know what's going to happen in 2028? The same thing. They'll pass another bill under cover of night, and they'll kick the can down the road for another 2 or 4 years. At a minimum, we, the people, deserve and demand free, fair elections and a system that will deliver them. Write your state rep, exercise your free will, let them know how seriously disappointed you are in them. We'll get the list and we'll put it in the show notes, and so you can look down it and find out how your representative voted. But it's time to get tough. It is time to get tough. It's time for the Senate to pass the SAVE Act, and it's time for the Georgia legislature to do the right thing. They failed. They consciously said, we're not going to redistrict, when virtually every Republican state, every red state in America have redistricted. Why are they doing that? That's not true. Not every red state, a lot of them, most notably Texas and I think North Carolina, Ohio. We went down the list a couple of weeks ago on The Truth. But why did they redistrict? Because the United States Supreme Court said that racial gerrymandering is no longer legal in this country. And so if you, the states, have drawn your congressional maps based on racial numbers and gerrymandering, you can redistrict, and you cannot use race as a criteria in how you draw those lines. So a lot of states jumped in to take advantage of the new law that the Supreme Court effectively mandated. And what did Georgia do? They did nothing. And a lot of people are pointing the finger at John Burns and some other selected House members and members of the Georgia Senate. I think it's disgraceful. I think it's absolutely disgraceful. Now, on redistricting, they said that they didn't want to give the Democrats an issue that they could be beat up over. And to me, that's not leadership. That's cowardice. Leaders don't cower in the face of opposition. They meet it head on and they confront it. But so these people are either weaklings, or they're not being straight with us, or they lack courage. Any way you cut it, I think that is grounds for disqualification to serve in the Georgia Senate or House of Representatives. All right, so the Iran war that was started on February the 28th, we were told that it was only going to last a couple of weeks, maybe a month at the most. It's still going. Here as we record this broadcast on June the 27th, we're in the 4th month, starting the 5th, but there is progress. There is an agreement to agree on a peace settlement within 60 days. While they're meeting to do just that, they have committed to reopening the Straits of Hormuz to let oil flow. Already, oil has come down from over $100 a barrel to the low 80s. maybe even into the 70s at one point in this past week. And gas prices now are in most places under $4 a gallon. That's real progress. And the U.S. agreed to end the blockade. But then there's Israel, who wants to continue to wage a war on Iran and Lebanon in trying to defeat Hezbollah. So that makes it really tough for J.D. Vance, who's been charged with bringing the peace agreement to reality. Now, J.D. Vance, I said last week, to me, was a little bit of a unique choice to lead that effort. And I say that because, first of all, he was a dove when it came to entering a war with Iran. He argued against it, but then once the decision was made to go, he supported it. But he did warn. He did warn that we should not attempt to engage in regime change, and he cautioned against starting another forever war. As I've said on this broadcast, wars are easy to start. They're very difficult to end. But J.D. Vance has been charged with the responsibility of doing just that. And 70% of the people in the United States want this war to end and have a quick resolution to it. But 52% like the draft of the agreement that has been floated, while critics say that we're being much too generous and we're giving Iran too much. Well, Donald Trump said that if it works out, he'll take all the credit, and if it doesn't, he'll just blame JD. Which, if you remember, I said could be the reason that he put JD in that perilous position. It seemed to me that Marco Rubio would have been the logical person to have gone and negotiated this peace settlement, but Vance, the vice president, was chosen with and given the responsibility to do it. I think Vance is really, really smart. I think his people skills are superlative. He is tough, but without the sting. You know, Trump is tough, but he has a bit of a sting, don't you think? When he goes after people like John McCain and the Rob Reiner and some of the other people that he's just been really mean to in memoriam. And there's kind of an unwritten rule that in this country, you just don't do that. That's our culture is that you don't speak ill of the dead. But that's just how biting Trump can be. JD is tough, but he doesn't have that kind of a sting in the way that he combats his adversaries. So I think he's really effective. I think he has the skill set to do this. And the fact that he was not an early supporter of the conflict, I think does in a way make him ideally suited to now come in and be the peacemaker. But we shall see. I think what we've learned is that Iranians are stubborn. They're no pushovers. I think Trump thought that after he took over Venezuela and got rid of the leader there in such an easy way that he could go in, kill the leadership of Iran. He actually killed 2 levels of leadership. And you think, okay, well, we've gotten rid of all the fanatics. Now we can get some real reasoned and smart people in place. But no, what we've gotten is the son of the leader that President Trump military killed. As I've said before, I've never seen a conflict where we've gone in and actually killed the leaders of the people that we were at war with. We didn't do it in World War II. We didn't kill Hitler. We didn't go to Japan and kill their president. We didn't do it in Vietnam. We didn't go into North Vietnam and kill Ho Chi Minh. But just go down the list. But Trump went in, his military went in and killed a lot of people. And that's one thing that bothers me about Trump. I mean, you know, there's no that violates international law. And there was no trial, no tribunal. And just like the drug smugglers that were sitting ducks in the ocean. Look, I'm not defending drug smugglers, but nor am I defending killing them in the middle of the ocean without due process. Now, had there been a declaration of war, if we were at war with Venezuela and we thought that these people were soldiers, yeah, I mean, it's fair game. But shooting people and killing them on the high seas violates international law. I think it violates the law of human decency. If you really believe that they're culpable of drug running, then have the Coast Guard and the Navy go pick them up, take them to a military tribunal and try them for smuggling, drug smuggling. And if death is the penalty or life imprisonment, so be it. But it just, I'm sorry. I know a lot of people are going to disagree. Oh, well, you're just a softie. You must be a bleeding heart liberal at heart. No, I'm really not. I just believe in law and order, and I don't believe in cold-blooded murder. And I don't know how you can characterize that any other way. So that's why we have a court system in this country. That's why we have laws. And I don't think that the President of the United States should be empowered to go kill people for crimes when the penalty for the crime, at least if it was committed inside our borders, would not be death. So it's just something that gnaws on my conscience, and I feel the need to express that. But the overarching policy of stopping drugs from entering our country and killing our young people, I get it. It is certainly, you know, I'm a lawyer. I can argue either side. And this is the internal conflict that I have. When I campaigned for Attorney General in Georgia and campaigned all over the state, more often than not, someone would come up to me at a campaign stop and they would share a really sad story about losing a son or a daughter to fentanyl. And if I were one of those people, I wouldn't have any sympathy for those people that were killed on the high sea at all. I would be celebrating it. But still, I think that we have laws, we have international law, and that we have an obligation to uphold those laws. Don't go soft on the guys. By all means, don't. But stop them in their tracks. But just pick them up, put them through a trial, present your evidence, and if they're guilty, whatever the penalty is, implement it. And in many, it may be capital punishment. The law of the United States, I believe, utilizes capital punishment. It's legal on a federal level. I don't think that it's utilized. Most criminal proceedings occur in states where the actual crime occurred. So I don't know whether capital punishment would be a remedy for someone that engaged in drug smuggling or not. I could argue that it should be because they've murdered so many people, and they had to. They may not have intended to murder people, but that was a consequence. So they would be guilty of felony murder, and they should have to pay the stiffest penalty that the laws allow. But it's just a process I didn't like. But overall, you have to commend President Trump for saying no more. You're not going to bring these lethal drugs into our country. And it sent a very powerful message to people all over the world that we were fed up. Enough, no more. Now, interestingly, we didn't go after the cartels in Mexico where huge amounts of drugs come across the southern border. A lot more when Biden was president. But they have tunnels, they have mules, they have very sophisticated, clever ways of importing drugs into this country. And I'm surprised that we were after drug runners in Venezuela who imported a very small amount of fentanyl that came into the United States, and more heroin actually than fentanyl, if my information is correct. So I haven't been able to connect those dots. I suspect that it was part of the precursor in a public relations campaign to go in and snatch Maduro, and who's going to feel sorry for him under those circumstances, given that he was the leader of the country and was a sponsor of and participated in drug dealing. So my instinct was that it was as much a PR move as it was a law enforcement effort, and Maduro was taken into custody shortly thereafter. Cuba undoubtedly is next. I don't know what the justification will be. They're a sovereign country. They're in deep trouble economically. There's an example of where communism has been at work for 60 years, and the people are suffering from hunger, from lack of supplies and lack of food, lack of petroleum products, thanks to us, because we've stopped Venezuela oil from flowing into Cuba. A lot of moving parts, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Somebody told me the other day, yeah, the mob will be back in full swing in Cuba very shortly when they reopen casinos and destinations for American tourists to come. So we come to you, as you know, every week on cdm.press across their digital platforms. They are a news organization that specializes in the truth, just like we do. They have also printed media in Miami and Atlanta, Northern Virginia, and Colorado. And then, as I said, there are 13 digital platforms. We also come to you on the John Fredericks Media Network, 10 cities, 26 AM and FM radio stations up and down the East Coast. And we really appreciate our radio audience. We hear mostly from our radio audience in our email, johngordontruth@gmail.com. You can also watch us right now on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, X, and Getter. Our membership, our followers are growing. We've got 27,000 followers on Facebook right now. I wish some of you folks would go over and subscribe to us on YouTube. And I also love for people, as I say, to watch us on Getter, because you can interact with us live there. And we usually have 6,000 people, 4,000 people on our feed, another 6,000 on John Fredericks, another 6,000 on CDM Press, just on Getter. So we like that platform a lot. We're gaining traction on Rumble, which is a place for conservatives to hang out. You can also follow us on Facebook, X, TikTok, Instagram, Getter, and Truth Social. We're really getting a lot of new members on Truth Social. It doesn't cost you anything. You can join in less time than it's taken me to encourage you to do it. All of our past episodes are on johngordon.tv. And you can also listen to us in your car on Spotify, iHeart Podcast, Apple Podcast, and Amazon Music. So thank you for indulging me through that little bit of shameless promotion. But we do want our channels to grow. I think our content, I'm told that our content is really good, that people like it. We do work really hard to bring you the truthful part of the news and not adopt the narratives. In fact, we want to defeat the narratives and unearth the truth. That is our mission. And let me know how we're doing. Email me, johngordontruth@gmail.com. Joe Persaud is up next. He's the Chief Operating Officer of American Transit Insurance Company. He's going to talk about the socialist communist trends in New York. It was a good interview. I'd encourage you to stick around and listen. Dr. Andrew Fox, the author, pastor, and priest, talking about how visitors to America see our country in contrast to how the media portrays it abroad. And then Michael Pack, he's a filmmaker, and he also has produced a op-ed piece that ran in the New York, or in the Wall Street Journal rather, called The Lockdown Dissidents. He's also converted that into a documentary that is on the Wall Street Journal opinion page. So that's the show today. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our sponsors, Anessa's Hemp, Masculine Man, and their products for men's hygiene. They make deodorant, and we had an interview with the owner of Masculine Man on last week's show. It's a great success story on a company that is a real entrepreneur. We like to also thank Bogey's Beef for their support of our show, and of course, Bone Frog Coffee. Thanks to all of you who listen. Tell your friends, family, parishioners to please join you every Saturday and Sunday from noon to 2 on the radio and then on our live streams. Now let's get right to our first interview with Joe Persaud. We'll get right back to the show after this brief word from our sponsor, Masculine Man Essentials. Look, most deodorants on the shelf are full of aluminum, parabens, and synthetic junk. Masculine Man Essentials goes at it differently. All natural ingredients, built for men, and it actually holds up through the whole day long. Whether you're at the office, at the gym, in traffic, or just getting home for the night, try Masculine Man Essentials. I've been using it, and I can tell you, it's the real deal. Head to masculinemanessentials.com, grab yourself a 2-pack or a 4-pack, use the promo code TRUTH at the checkout to save on your first order, and the link is in today's show notes. As you know, we don't put our name on anything that we haven't tried and believe in. So when I tell you about Nessa's Hemp, I want you to listen up. Nessa's Hemp is a Chicago-based company that makes hemp, and it was founded by Anessa. And what she's built is really something. We're talking about clean, high-quality hemp products with no gimmicks, just real ingredients, real transparency, with real results. Whether you're dealing with stress, sleep issues, inflammation, or you just want to add something natural to your wellness routine, Nessa's Hemp has something to offer you. Head over to nessahemp.com, that's Nessas hemp.com, and check out what they've got. Use our promo code TRUTH for a discount just by being our listener. Joe Persaud goes to work in Manhattan every day, and now he can ride the bus for free, or at least that's what Mamdani said. Joe, welcome to The Truth.
Hey, thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. We're happy to have you. You've worked in the insurance industry for 40 years, fighting fraud and reducing the risk of insurers, and you deal with a lot of public transportation companies that you insure, giving you a inside look at Manhattan and New York's public transportation. Can you get a free bus ride these days?
Promises, but that's not coming true. Not yet. Not now. It's a great promise, but you've got to pay for it somehow.
City grocery stores?
No, not yet.
No free food, no free transportation. So much for socialism. What's the climate like in New York politically? What today? I mean, we get information from the news media, which, you know, aside from The Truth with John Gordon, we don't really pay much attention to, because I don't think they tell the truth. They certainly slant the news.
Right.
But as a New Yorker, what's it like to live there? Have you noticed changes over the last year or not?
Well, obviously, with the new mayor in, a lot of things have been shifted, but it's still brand new. We're still in the 5th month or 6th month. But New York is, I mean, there are people who are picking up and leaving,
Yeah.
people who are coming. But I must tell you that it's in a euphoric mood right now because the Knicks won their third game. It was a miracle last night. So the whole, if you're asking what's happening right now at this moment, New York is in a euphoric mood because of sports
You kept
bringing
me,
them to.
you all kept me up late. And
Yeah,
then I was so excited I couldn't go to sleep. That may have been, well, I think it was the greatest comeback in NBA history
it was.
in a championship game. 30
It was.
points. And I've always had the perception that you just watch the last 2 minutes of a basketball game and save yourself the other hour and 58
Well,
minutes. But
in this case, yeah, it's the last 5 minutes of this game that really made it there. I've never seen anything like that. 29 points down, and they just made a go at it, and then down to the last 3 seconds.
well, it's exciting times, I know, for New Yorkers. So the whole transportation industry appears to me to be in a state of evolution, rapid change.
Yeah,
You have Waymo that has come to many major cities. I rode Waymo in Los Angeles for a week,
right.
and I'd gotten an Uber, and I was complaining about how long it took to get the Uber and then how much the fare was. And one of my son's friends said, "Well, why didn't you take Waymo?" I said, "I don't know. It never occurred to me to take Waymo." He said, "Yeah, you can just download the app and call a Waymo. It's just like an Uber, but it
Right.
costs half as much, and you don't have to worry about a driver having to conversate with him or her." And I took it, and the first ride I took, I was a little uneasy, even though I have a Tesla with full self-driving. I'm still in charge. I'm sitting
Yeah,
in the driver's seat with my hand
sure.
at the ready and my foot on the ready to hit the brake. But in the Waymo, I was riding in the back seat. There is no driver. There is nobody in the passenger side of the car, and and it takes a minute to get used to it. But boy, after that, what a incredible experience. Now, I would think that Manhattan would be the penultimate test for a autonomous car. Have you ridden in a Waymo there?
I haven't, and I know I will sometime, and I know it's a psychological. You got to have that. You got to go over that threshold, and I guess you know how it was the first few minutes. Uh, but they are. I think they have 8 or 10 cars out there. The last I heard that they were doing a pilot here in New York City. I did not think they would be piloting here yet, but they are, and it's amazing. I haven't heard what has happened. They've been keeping the data kind of quiet, but we're in the transportation business. We're trying to figure out what's going on there.
Manhattan would be the ultimate stress test, I would think, because you have to be prepared for the unexpected in Manhattan. In Las Vegas, where they've had Waymo now for a couple of years, I believe, and it's geo-fenced. It doesn't go all over Las Vegas. Just like in LA, you can go everywhere but the airport, for God's
Yeah,
sakes.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but in Las Vegas, the streets are very tightly regulated. There are police barriers up on the sides of the sidewalks, making it really hard to jaywalk or dart into the street. They're not everywhere, but they're in the high traffic areas. And but the streets are wide, and the traffic moves pretty freely. New York, you've got gridlock, you've got people jaywalking, you've got bicyclists,
Sure.
public transportation, everything imaginable that could make designing and implementing an autonomous car a challenge, I would think. Do you have any sense for how it's going?
We're trying to get some data on it, and I would think it's going okay because we have not heard bad news.
Yeah.
If there was something bad, I think it would have hit the news. So they're keeping it under wraps for now, and it's going to change transportation dramatically without that
Well,
driver.
don't you think it's going to change insurance dramatically as well? You know, Tesla is in, I don't remember exactly how many states. I think it's 8 or 10.
Right.
And they base their insurance rate based on their evaluation of the driver. And in a Tesla, they know everything that the driver's doing. They know if they're speeding, if they're going through yellow lights, if they're doing rolling stops. They collect all the data, and they base your premium on your driving score. So if you're a good driver and you obey the laws, then you get a lower rate. If you're like me and have a heavy foot and you want to speed, or God forbid, run red lights, which I think is the most prevalent cause of fatalities in automobiles, are people running red lights. So our listeners, don't do that. But I think that is the free marketplace at its finest. What's your thought?
Yeah, I think it is. It's going to be one of those, like an odd industrial revolution in that sense. I would also say that in New York City, aside from all the things you've mentioned, the pedestrians, the different places, and the stops and goes, you're dealing with about 150 to 200,000 drivers who depend on this space for a living. We at American Transit, that's our bread and butter. We deal with these people every day. So even with this new technology coming in, you're going to have to deal with the human part of it. You're dealing with 150, 200,000 lives, and they each have 3 or 4 lives depending on them. So it's not going to be a immediate shift to like, oh, 50% of them are going to be autonomous. I don't see that happening within the next 5 years. I think it's going to be probably, I mean, I this is just off the top of my head, maybe 5-10% maybe. But I can't see it shifting a lot. Not when you're dealing with 150, 200,000 lives. And that's one of the things that American Transit is trying to do, is improve their lives, because they're actual people who they need to make a living.
Well, they do need to make a living, but of course, the argument on the other side is that a autonomous car is a fraction of the cost of a car with a driver. And it is also, even right now, significantly safer than a car driven by a human. So isn't that going to play heavily into the decision? If you can make a safer experience at a lower cost, what's the issue here except protecting the driver?
No, I think that's a great point. Safety and the costs.
Affordability, as Mamdani would probably label it.
Yeah, that's the word. So yeah, I think it will happen. But like anything else across the country, across the world, this reminds me of when Uber was getting into the business across the world 10 years ago. They were telling Uber, you can't do it. And then Uber was like, no, the public needs this. So to your point, we're at another infraction state in this transportation industry across the country, that if safety and costs is much more better than the alternative, there's gonna be a big push for it.
It's going to be hard to say no, I think.
Yeah, and the drivers are going to end up probably doing other jobs. So and American Transit is also ready. We have a sister company called Excelsior that's ready to help them in any way, even there if it moves to autonomous. I think there is a law, John, here in New York, where it's on the books that autonomous vehicles have to have a person inside. So, to your point, as to whether it will move, it probably will move to autonomous vehicles in some form or fashion because of the safety and the costs. But New York on the books has something where they have some human person has to be in there, and our long-term vision is really to help make that happen and work with that person who's in there and shift to that level. Yes, we can't put a blind eye to safety and cost.
Well, it is an exciting time, and I think that at some point, buses and trains will likely be autonomous as well, and it will be a safer experience for all concerned.
Yes.
I do agree that the acceptance rate is going to be slow at first, and then probably the proverbial hockey stick. But you know better than I and our listeners that getting around Manhattan can be a real chore. And Governor Hochul even wanted to impose a congestion tax on drivers in Manhattan. Don't you think that once automobiles move to autonomous, that the belief is that it will be cheaper to ride in a robotaxi, an autonomous taxi, regardless of brand. It'll be cheaper than it will be to own a car. You won't have the expense of the car. You won't have insurance. You won't have to pay for parking. You won't have to pay for maintenance. All the stuff that goes with the joy of car ownership. It could be a very exciting time, and that in itself could cure the congestion in New York, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Pre-COVID, I think there was a lot of move towards some of what you were saying because, yeah, you had rentals where you can rent them for 3 hours, or even a taxi was much cheaper. Then when COVID came, because of not wanting to be in congested areas and with the public and in buses, people started buying cars. So I think at this stage, we're 5 years away from COVID. It will start to get back to that point where it's much cheaper to use a taxi, and in this case, a robo taxi, and use those types of transportation. I think you're right about that. Especially in New York City, the congestion is crazy. I was near to the Knicks Madison Square Garden yesterday at about 6 o'clock. The thousands and thousands of people, and the cars couldn't move. We were at a technology conference at Jacob Javits Center trying to get back home. But it's to your point. The congestion is unbelievable.
Well, lucky for you, it wasn't raining, or else you'd still be in traffic.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Joe Persaud, thank you for coming on The Truth today and giving us a look into the state of and the current state of the condition of Manhattan and New York, and appreciate the opportunity to get to know you.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you so much for having us.
As if the world didn't have enough problems, the British Prime Minister, Starmer, has just resigned. Here to give us some insight into all of that is Dr. Andrew Fox. He has the distinction of being both a priest and a pastor. Is that a distinction without a difference, or is it the same side of the coin? We'll ask him, but we also will look for some insight into the resignation of the Prime Minister of Great Britain, because Dr. Andrew Fox is also British. And he is the author of an upcoming book called Truth in the Age of Applause. I have so many questions for you, Dr. Fox, and welcome to The Truth.
Pleasure to be here.
So your book, I don't know if it violates our trademark or not, but it's called Truth in the Age of Applause. What you trying to convey with that title?
Exactly what it says. The parenthesis of that title is how stupidity is ruining the American dream. So in the world of media, public stages, just go to the Oscars, the Emmys, just go to any public gathering where celebrities are. Someone will make a statement like, you know, my son's come out as a transgender and he's now going to be a woman, and the whole audience stand up and give a 3-minute ovation. Applause does not mean what is said is true. And this is what Dietrich Bonhoeffer was saying in the Second World War. He defined stupidity not as the lack of knowledge or intelligence, but as abdicating your moral, individual judgment and thought just to go along with the cultural norms, like applauding things that are said that are not true. And so using his definition, I home in on 17 steps in this book, how stupidity enters government, school districts, nonprofits, even churches, where applause validates what's being said, but what's being said is not true. And so these steps that I talk about show how it happens and how to speak out against that, how to stand for what is real. That's the emphasis of the book.
I could not agree with you more. Since I was a little boy, I've always wanted to be popular. I don't know anyone who aspires to be unpopular, but I've never really considered myself to be that popular. And I have ascribed it a low level of importance to me personally, because I found that in high school, to be popular, I had to act like I love to drink alcohol and consume more than was healthy. And in college, I was from Macon, Georgia, and went to Ohio Wesleyan, which was and continues to be a somewhat liberal college with a lot of people from the East. And marijuana permeated the air. I had smelled marijuana once, but I'd never partaken in it, and it was just commonplace. Yeah. And so I found that in order to be popular in college, you had to smoke weed and take drugs, and if you wanted to be popular, and that wasn't important to me to be popular that badly. But it seems to me, I'm trying to validate your point, that being popular has become one of the most important norms of our society, and people are willing to stoop to no known lows to become popular. Elon Musk calls it appearing to be sounding virtuous while acting in non-virtuous ways. Is that what you're driving at?
Yes, it is. And I think the huge elephant in the room is the mayor of New York. His campaign and the applause that he was getting from my children's generation, and I have 3 kids that are in their 20s, 2 of them married. I got 3 grandkids. I'm at that stage of life where I'm learning from the next generation. It's that generation that we're picked to sort of Gen Z. And the promises he was making and the applaud he was receiving got him into office. But the reality of him being in office is proving quite a contradiction. And you could say the same for the new mayor in Seattle. I used to live in the Pacific Northwest. Seattle was a beautiful city. Downtown Seattle is a violent and terrible place to go right now. That's reality. Good policing is needed. But when you have this defund police and all of these statements that get the applause of a whole generation, it's nothing but hot air. As a priest, the authority that you live by is scripture, and that existed before me. It will exist after me. And what it says in itself is that truth endures. Apply that to just simple things of gender. There's a male, there is a female. Now, I understand there are men that are attracted to men and women that are attracted to women. I accept that. But this transgenderism, to say I am a woman when you're a man, look, an atheist physician will tell you the science defies what you're saying. It's not true. And so all these subjects, all these current agendas that are being jammed down our throat, they do not deserve applause. And if they get them, it doesn't validate the truth, as you say.
Yeah, but that candidate for Senate in Texas has told us that there are actually 6 genders. So how do we know that you're right and he's wrong?
Well, you can either look at
I'm being,
yeah,
that is hyperbole, by the way,
you
just in
look,
case there's any confusion.
no, I'm sure we're on the same page, but you can look at that theologically, or you can look at it scientifically, even socially, and you will come up with the same answer each time. Look, James, that's running, for
Talarico.
Yeah, he's the baby face, smooth talker that will change his politics for his party and his party for his politics. He calls himself a Christian, but he says Christianity is, one of the biggest evils in the world. He gets to preach in his very, very liberal church. He comes out with the wildest statements like God is non-binary. Well, of course, he's playing for the applause.
I don't even know what that means.
Well, that God is neither male or female, but the scriptures gender God as him, yes, and he and father, because we as readers understand that. It's a literary dynamic. And he's saying God is non-binary. He's playing for applause.
But who is rendering the applause? I mean, who wants to sanction that kind of illogical, nonsensical thought process? It is bizarre to me.
Well, I think if you maybe for another time do a deep dive into our colleges and universities, the faculty. That used to be a place where you could float ideas. The professor would argue with you academically, and you'd be right or wrong, and some things would emerge and some things would die away. That's higher education. But today, higher education, especially in the humanities, is encouraging thought that has no real basis to it, like the thing of a gender or gender pulling apart a heterosexual marriage, destroying the role of a father. Look at what the governor in New York's done, taken away the word mother and replaced it with gestating parent. What are you going to do on Mother's Day? Say happy gestating parent? The implications of this nonsensical, unintelligent moves forward are tearing away at what it is to be a true American, of which I became at the age of 31.
So what is it, Dr. Fox? Is it P.T. Barnum being revealed in real time? He famously said there's a sucker born every minute. Is that what we're seeing? We also know that we've been told for the last 60 years that the average reading level of the average American is second grade. I mean, have we just dumbed down our society to the point that these nonsensical arguments resonate with people just so they can sound virtuous or different or whatever their goal is? Or is there something more sinister going on? I very much am open to the possibility that there is some force at work in this country that is intentionally, very intentionally dividing us, that they are working to promote these idiotic ideologies that are so absurd that it separates our people into two different sides. And I just wonder if my instinct might be right.
Well, you raise a very, very good philosophical point there as well. And I think, for instance, the World Cup being staged in the United States is a two-sided coin. One side is hilarious. The other side speaks to exactly what you just said. So 48 nations are present in the United States right now to celebrate this competition that's been going since 1930. The last time it was held in the United States was 1994, but it was kind of overshadowed by O.J. Simpson's chase down the highway. Now it's become something very different. And what the Dutch and the Swedes and the German and the Scottish and so on and so forth, they're all over social media. No one's paying them to do this. They're saying we cannot believe the friendliness of America, the hospitality, the welcome we receive, the refills on drinks that Europeans don't get, and Buc-ee's and gas stations and these ginormous stores and pro bass shops. And they are enamored by the wonder and the hospitality of the community that is the United States. Now, that is the humorous side of the coin. There's a guy called Freddie on social media. No one pays him. He's Scottish, and he's become a phenomenon because he's enamored by his visit to NASA, Southern hospitality, college football, Buc-ee's, and so on and so forth. And he's just so appreciative. But all these nations are saying the same thing. The image of America in our own countries is portrayed a different way. So they all came thinking it's about visa issues, it's about immigration, it's about policing, it's about trouble and security. They get here and they find the image that's been created for them is not true. No one in these 48 countries are saying we see the Islamic faith everywhere and it's taking over America. No, they're not saying that. And so we've got a fun thing to look at that for the past 26 years I've been living in the United States. It's a great place to live. You cannot make it here. You'll never make it anywhere. The
What
other
part
side,
of the country do you live?
I live
heard
in
you say
Austin,
you were in-
Texas.
Oh, Austin. Well, that's
but
kind of a hot seat of
Oh,
liberals.
it is. Oh, it is, and I get a lot of hate mail, believe you me. And but I hail from Nottingham, Robin Hood country in the UK. So I bring that kind of dynamic with me. But the way America portrays itself to itself, that also needs to be in question. Look, in the 26 years I've lived in the States, in all sincerity, and I don't mean this harshly, I've never seen so many dumb, not eloquent, they can't really string a sentence together, representatives of the people on a local, state, and national level. It's like, how did these people get there? That answers your question.
Well, I'll tell you my personal belief on that. And I think that's a very important question to look at. I've run for public service twice, and I didn't win either time, but mostly because I got in way too late. That reveals my biggest weakness is a human condition called procrastination. But anyway, people ask me, well, did you enjoy it? Did you like it? And my response was, I thrived on it. I loved it. And they said, what did you like about it? And I said, I learned the goodness of the people with whom I contacted. Just without I can think of 2 or 3 minor exceptions out of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people who I met, many of whom I met at their front doorstep. And they were generous, they were kind, even those who did not like my politics. They welcomed me into their homes, and they would usually share their events of their life that had been adverse. And it just really warmed my heart. And I do think that we should allow ourselves to be revealed to one another. But the problem, I believe, it's twofold. One, the media doesn't make money by spreading good news. They only if it bleeds, it leads. That's their mindset. And we see it played out every day on the news. The other thing is, and I guess this is not a new phenomenon since the crucifixion of Jesus, I think we have been very cruel to our leaders. And I mean horribly cruel. We criticize them, we criticize their families, and when we don't get our way, some just kill them. So, I live in a very affluent part of the country in Palm Beach, Florida. And people ask me all the time, why do you allow yourself to be put in this position? Why do you do this? And I said, because I care about our country, I care about my kids, and I care about my grandkids. They want nothing to do with it because they've seen how horribly we treat our leaders. So I think some of the blame actually does fall back on the people. We kind of get what we put out. The third point that I'll make, and then you're supposed to be the one being interviewed, but I can't. You've got all my neurons firing.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I lost my train of thought. There was a third point that I was going to make, but anyway, you can respond.
Well, destroying your leaders. Okay, in Great Britain, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has just resigned. Yes. I think there's valid reasons why he should have resigned, personally. But in the bigger scheme of things, Great Britain has had 7 prime ministers in 10 years. That weakens the nation. So something is amiss there. Either the people refuse to be led, the people cannot be led, or it's like you say, we elect someone into power, and he won by quite a landslide. We elect someone into power, and then we quickly take it from them and destroy them. Well, that's a phenomena that I see over here. The people have elected our current president of the United States. I really like Donald Trump. He can be blunt. He can be extremely straightforward, but the people voted for him, and I voted for him. But the rhetoric is that this is not good for America, but America has voted him in. So what voice, what source, what origin, what base is this argument derived? I mean the Save America Act or the SAVE Act, for instance. I came to this country on a religious workers visa. It had limitations. I couldn't vote. I then became a green card, a permanent residence. I couldn't vote, but I had greater permissions. I then became a citizen. I have all the blessings and privileges of the amendments of the Constitution and so much more, and I can vote. When I go to vote, I've been through the process where I'm proud to bring out my driver's license to say, here's my proof of privilege of voting, and I get to vote. I don't understand why that is being attacked. I've been through the process. And if you go through it, you will honor it. You will value it. It's like your kids. If you hand everything to them, they're going to grow up real bad. But if you make them work for it, teach them consequence, then there's going to be value. And the attack against this voter ID is taking away the natural process of valuing what it is to vote in the United States. And I don't understand that argument as a foreign national that's become an American citizen. It's not the country of 26 years ago. It seems to be more and more and more fractured. And so, yes, I do believe there are forces at work to pull apart the United States. And again, the World Cup and the foreign nationals that are hilariously celebrating the United States. Wouldn't you love to see that from our own people? Wouldn't you love to see a human interest article on mainstream news that makes us all smile, that makes us all become heartwarming? Back in the days where we invented things, we landed on the moon. And I know it sounds like rhetoric. Where have these days gone that just make it a heartwarming experience for everyone. That's what I long for. That's what I love.
So I have been advocating to anyone that will listen, as well as our audience on the show, for 2 or 3 years now, that exactly the point that you're making. But I think there is a real opportunity in this country right now for a politician to emerge that will say, to hell with Democrats, to hell with Republicans. On what can we agree? Can we agree that today is, well, we're recording, I usually say Saturday, but since we're the truth, we're recording this on Wednesday. Can we agree that today is Wednesday? Can we agree that it is a pretty day? Can we agree that we should not kill? Can we agree we should not steal? Can we agree that we will not try and take your neighbor's spouse? Yes. On what can we agree? I suspect that if we started making a list, it would be a very, very long list, and it would overshadow the fact that someone is white versus someone who is black versus someone who is Islamic, and just on what can we agree, and then live by that code. Of course, in my view, that should be the 10 Commandments, but you can't bring religion into the conversation. So I just say, take the biblical sound away and don't say thou shalt not kill. Just say, we're not going to kill each other. Period.
So that is the essence of truth without applause. We should agree on these things, and it doesn't invoke massive applause because it doesn't need it, because they're true. They've always been true, and they always will be true. So why do we have to reach for the bottom of the barrel and the sensational? You know, in England, there are two major parties. There's the Conservative and Labour, and a new party has emerged in Nigel Farage. And he's a bit of a wild card, but he was interviewed the other day. It wasn't the BBC, but he was interviewed and asked, do you want to be prime minister? And his answer was very refreshing. He said, that's not my goal, but if the people want me there, I will do my best. And that was so refreshing. It wasn't listening to a talking head or someone selling himself for the applause. Now, whether he'll make a good prime minister, I really don't know. But I mean, even in our own country, Brandon Gill, a great straight talker who is extremely American. I hope he will gain a greater platform to speak for what does not need applause, but what is simply the American way.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, I've had this notion for many, many years that if you want to find out what is going to happen in this country, you really just need to go travel around Europe. And what you see there will end up here 5 or 10 years later. The first revelation was disco. I mean, I was in England and France in the 70s, and disco was the rage. And sure enough, 5 years later, discotheques were everywhere in America. Yeah. Similarly, you've seen these great migrations and the influx of foreign people into countries like France and England, mostly Muslims that have come there. And it's curious to me what the draw is, and more curious why the leadership will allow the influx of these people. And I'm just wondering if that is intentional or whether it is by accident. But it certainly tears the nations apart. And we're starting to see, obviously, great migrations into this country, mostly Hispanic, which have been shut off. Mm-hmm. But we do seem to have more people from Indian and Muslim descent coming into America.
You know, John, in my filing cabinet, just 6 foot away from me here, there is a file And in that letter, in that file, there is a letter, a statutory letter from President Obama when I became a citizen. And in that letter, and it's never changed to this present day, except the signature of the president, it's a welcome to America. Learn our language, which is English. It's clearly stated. Pay your taxes, contribute to the community, practice your faith, raise your family here, work here, participate in the great experiment that it's called, the United States. And there is a paragraph of obligations of what it is to be a citizen. I think sometimes in my thinking, the obligations of what it is to be a naturalized American are rejected. They shouldn't be. When you are a naturalized American, and otherwise you were born in another country, there are obligations that come with this step. They should be made clear, they should be understood, and they should be carried out. So when I read on X or something like that, on my X account, that someone running for office couldn't find somewhere to wipe her hands, so she wiped them on the American flag, that is contrary to the welcome to this country. In that welcome letter, it never states you can bring your national flag. Never. I'm British at the core, but I'm an American citizen, and I fly the American flag outside my house. I will never fly the British flag outside my house because it's not Great Britain. Now, on the inside of my house, on my office wall, I've got a flag framed from 1952 that's British, but that's private in my house here. And so the idea that you can celebrate your traditions and customs and bring them with you must not overrun, we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and what that means. And I don't know that is being taught in grade school, in middle school, in high school, and it's certainly not being taught in higher education. I guarantee if you just did an interview or a survey amongst high schoolers, most of them wouldn't know the rich heritage of the United States. They wouldn't. Imagine this. On July the 4th this year, not only will it be the celebration of the 250th birthday of the United States, but there's a probability, John, that England will play the United States in the World Cup on July the 4th. What
that would be
that's going to be
unbelievable. I would think that would be divine intervention on its face. I mean, how could that happen other than if God willed it to be?
But look at what will happen is if we do get to play as national teams on July the 4th, and let's say that England lose 3-1 and America goes forward or wins the World Cup, the British will not strike up violence in the streets of Boston or Miami or New York or Chicago. The British will go out for a pint with their American brothers, and they'll be hurling friendly sarcasm at each other. Mm-hmm. That's needed. But in the migration of certain cultures where the religion is the culture and the culture is the religion, it's one and the same thing. There are dangers there to the freedoms and liberties that we have in the United States. We don't treat our women that way. We don't treat our children that way. You could be American and atheist. You could be American and Christian. You could be American and Hindu, but you cannot be a Muslim without the Islamic faith, and you cannot be the Islamic faith without being a Muslim. Those two are inseparable. And the documents you receive when you become a citizen clearly state allegiance to the flag. You have to have your hand over your heart. You have to raise your right hand. You have to pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and what it represents. So I think this World Cup game, what will emerge is how we can really celebrate diversity without needing some ridiculous diversity, inclusion, equality officer telling us how to think and what words to use. We know if America play England. They'll all be at the bar buying each other drinks. And there'll be sarcasm over the 13 colonies. There'll be jokes about King George, and no one will be offended, but everyone will have a good time. We need to recover this.
Well, I will certainly drink to that, and I'll also celebrate whoever is victorious. But you make great points, and I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. Dr. Andrew Fox, author of Truth in the Age of Applause, and he is both a priest and a pastor. It has been my pleasure and our listeners to have you on The Truth today. Thank you, and I hope you'll come back.
Thank you.
Do you ever grind through the day like I do? You need that perfect kick without the jitters? Grab some Bone Frog Coffee. They're our studio sponsor. And best of yet, they are veteran owned, founded by retired Navy SEAL Tim Cruikshank as a tribute to his fallen teammates in the Naval Special Warfare community. Each bag tells a story and gives a peek behind the curtain of special operations. If you don't already know it, the Bone Frog is a sacred symbol of SEAL teams that represent those that gave their lives in combat and is a reminder of the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom and the American way of life. Every bag, premium, small batch, roasted from top shelf Arabica beans, smooth, low acid, no Robusta junk. Think bold blends like Frogman Dark Roast or the classic Bone Frog Medium. Tastes like freedom in a cup. And here's the real deal. A chunk of every sale goes straight to helping SEAL vets and Gold Star families. They're aiming to raise $500,000. Coffee with a cause? Yeah, that's not a slogan. It's brotherhood brewed daily. Head to bonefrogcoffee.com, snag some K-Cups, whole beans, or merchandise. Use the promo code TRUTH. Start your day like I do. Fuel up, stay sharp, and remember, service before self. Support our vets and thank Bone Frog for sponsoring our studio. Check them out now at bonefrogcoffee.com. That's www.bonefrogcoffee.com. Our audience may remember very few weeks ago, we had Michael Pack on The Truth to talk about his documentary, The Last 600 Meters. It was about a sniper's account of his experience in Iraq. Well, we welcome back Michael Pack today to talk about a topic that still just will not go away, and that is the COVID pandemic that inflicted our country and the world. Michael, welcome back to The Truth.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
So you've done how many documentaries? 15?
I've done over 15. They've all been nationally broadcast on PBS, and then award-winning, favorably reviewed. But now we've started a new series with the Wall Street Journal opinion section, and they are shorter documentaries. Our documentary about battles of Fallujah and Najaf, The Last 600 Meters, was 90 minutes, and we've usually done 90-minute and 2-hour films. But now we're doing these 30-minute films with the Wall Street Journal, and Wall Street Journal opinion, I should say, and we take an issue or an idea or an event from the past that people don't remember or were misreported at the time and try to tell the story in a straightforward narrative fashion and let viewers decide what they think. And now we have come out with the third of the 3 that we've done with them. And this one, called Lockdown Dissidents, is about the COVID lockdowns and the people who opposed the COVID lockdowns and what happened to them. So your listeners can go, and they're free on the Wall Street Journal, not behind their paywall. So they can go to just WSJ.com or their YouTube page and search for Lockdown Dissidents, or go to WSJ.com/opinion docs and be able to see all 3 that are already out there.
Well, I will do just that. I'm in Atlanta overseeing some renovations to our house here, and I've got a lot of spare time on my hands. So now I know how I'm going to film. All right, so tell us about Lockdown Dissidents. I mean, it was an unprecedented historical event in the world's history, really. Tell us what your angle is in looking back.
It really is an unprecedented event. We have found in doing the film that a lot of people would rather just forget about it and move on. It was a difficult time for many people, but it was really this huge disaster for America, for the world. And why did it happen? We have to make sure we don't make the same mistakes again. So
and that's
we
why
really think
that's why we shouldn't just move on.
That's right. Exactly.
Yes, thank you.
That's why we have to remember. So we tell the story from the beginning in Wuhan in December of 2019, which is where lockdowns really emerged from. You may remember, obviously the virus originated there. And then Wuhan, because it's part of China, a totalitarian government, locked down in the way only a totalitarian government could. People were imprisoned in their rooms, really. Some people were sealed in, or even welded doors. Doors to their homes were welded shut. So the WHO went to Wuhan and declared this strategy of locking down everybody a great success. And then the world followed. And it was, as you just said, John, unprecedented. Of course, we've had pandemics. We've had, coronavirus pandemics. We've had similar pandemics over the years, and we've never done this thing where everybody locks down, whole cities, whole countries lock down. It was a giant experiment, and it turned out to be completely unnecessary. Data came in pretty early, and we look at the people who got the early data, like Jay Bhattacharya, now head of the NIH, then a Stanford professor, who did a study in Santa Clara County in California that was then reproduced across the country, that determined right away by March that COVID was really disproportionately affecting older people. Young people had really nearly nothing to worry about. And the logical thing to do was the traditional thing, which he called focused protection, which is what we have done for hundreds of years, where those most at risk are sheltered in place or locked down, older people in this case. Young people should go about their daily lives, and surely schools should be reopened. But in spite of this data, schools were not reopened, in some cases for years. California, New York may be the worst. I don't remember what it was like in Georgia. And against the evidence. I mean, Dr. Fauci. So we tell that story, and then then we follow Anthony Fauci, Robert Redfield, who are on the inside of the White House to find out how and why the White House chose to suppress that story and enforce a series of lockdown measures that were already proven to be the least effective strategy. And then finally, we look at how the government's effort to suppress these people, to reach out to social media and have their views deplatformed or shadow banned, worked out, in violation of their First Amendment rights. And so we tell that whole story from an insider point of view in a chronological, story-oriented fashion.
Well, I heard you say that the coronavirus originated in a laboratory in Wuhan. I thought it came from a bat cave 2 hours away from Wuhan.
Yeah, well, we don't do too much about COVID origins, but yes, I think it's pretty clear that that's another case where the government had their official line for various reasons and chose to suppress counter evidence that turned out to be true.
When you say the government, wasn't it really like two people in the government, namely Anthony Fauci and people that he could control? And, so much about the story in retrospect just does not make sense. It didn't make sense then. We know that it's just a lie now, that the virus came from a bat cave. That was a lie, and it was told to us by Anthony Fauci. Then we learned that, actually it was in the Wuhan lab that was in China. But then we found out an additional little tidbit, and that is the National Institute of Health and Infectious Disease, headed by none other than Anthony Fauci, helped fund that very Wuhan lab. We were also told that Dr. Fauci just followed the science and that we had to mask and social distance, but then we've subsequently found his emails where he specifically, explicitly states there is no evidence that masking and social distancing stops the spread of the COVID virus. So the whole thing seemed to have been based on a lie. And then when people like the guy that was the head of the CDC spoke out, they get censored or canceled.
Exactly. I mean, it was very much, they ignored the evidence and they continue to push as the only way, only ideas, the absolute right, science, as you say, their own views. I mean, we have Robert Redfield, who was then the head of the CDC, saying
that's who I was recalling.
In an early meeting of the coronavirus task force at the White House, the president spoke, and maybe the vice president spoke, and Alex Azar spoke, Secretary of HS, and then he spoke, and then Fauci spoke, and Fauci said, I'm the expert here, you'll direct things to me. And afterwards, Robert Redfield said, so Anthony Fauci, not the head of the NIH, he runs a lab there. So Robert Redfield says, you run a lab at the NIH. There are like 100 labs at the NIH or something like that. Why are I am the head of the CDC. What does that mean that you're the expert? But Anthony Fauci managed to accumulate that power, he and Deborah Birx, who ran the task force.
Right.
And it was an amazing power grab, but it could only happen, John, it wasn't exactly one man, and it looked like one man, but he had been there for 40 years, and he had seeded the place with people who worked for him, people who knew him. So he was supported internally by all these people, and he had developed contacts in the media and contacts on the Hill over 40 years, and they supported him too. So it seemed to come out of nothing, but he had been there since he oversaw the response to the AIDS epidemic in the 80s. So he had developed a power base. And I worked in the first Trump administration. I ran international broadcasting, and I could tell you from personal experience, it is not easy to run counter to the accepted views of the people who have been there sitting in those seats for years and are career civil servants. I mean, President Trump doesn't call it the swamp for nothing. So, but Fauci was Fauci and Deborah Birx, they were the most official spokesman, and President Trump came to disagree with them, but it didn't really matter what he said. He was only the president, and they had usurped a kind of authority. I mean, one of the important things I think about the film is so that people, maybe your listeners already know that, but I live in Chevy Chase, Maryland, a very blue city, and most people had "Thank you, Dr. Fauci" signs on their lawns, or many did during COVID. And I think many, many of my neighbors still think he's a hero. I mean, let's not forget that subsequently, Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx both published books about how wonderful their service was during COVID, and how, the president wanted to ignore the science, but they didn't listen to him, even though he was their titular boss. So it is a horrible thing. It's worth understanding. Getting rid of Dr. Fauci doesn't eliminate the problem. We begin and end with Jay Bhattacharya, who was one of these COVID dissidents, and is now head of the NIH. But even heading these organizations doesn't solve the problem, as I can tell you from personal experience. It's a start.
Well, we saw that the CIA didn't mind going into their boss's office and stealing documents that she was in the midst of declassifying. So that's got to give you a little insight into how the hierarchy works in the federal government.
That is right. They know best, because they believe their expertise trumps the political process, and you cannot really convince them otherwise.
I think you just summed it up in a perfect nutshell. That is the essence of the swamp, isn't it? The political process is just a necessary inconvenience to them.
That it's really and it goes back to the origins of progressivism, if you don't mind this detour from my film.
No.
In the very beginning, leading progressives, President Wilson in that era and others like him, they felt that, there are two things, that the politics should deal with values, which are ever in flux and changing, and are irrelevant to the deeper policy questions, and they should be in the hands of experts. and the experts should be there permanently. And then the politicians could debate these superficial questions of values, but facts, scientific facts, which they think should guide the political process, that should be in the hand of experts. They divided the world into facts that experts control, which is virtually the objective world, and values, a sort of mushy another terrain that is irrelevant. And that was for politicians. And that division and that way of seeing it has persisted over the last 100 years. So it's been a long time.
Well, I think there is a certain level of credence in following that dogma that we're going to put it in the hands of the experts who are the scientists. I mean, that's a very compelling strategy to me. The problem for me arises not with putting it in the hands of experts and scientists, but putting it in the hands of so-called expert scientists, end of quote, who lie and are not honest. And we clearly know that we were lied to throughout the whole coronavirus debacle. And we also know that Anthony Fauci, with all the bluster that he could summon, effectively called Rand Paul a liar because he suggested that Anthony Fauci was participating in gain-of-function research. And we've just learned this week, in fact, or maybe it was last week, from documents that have been declassified, that Anthony Fauci was doing exactly what he looked in the camera and denied to the American people and the United States Senate that he was funding and an active participant in.
I would argue that if you let somebody like Anthony Fauci have a seat of power for 40 years, they will end up corrupt and believing in their own, that they know everything, and other people are deluded. But the real problem is, I think we obviously need experts, and scientific expertise is really important. But as the scientists in our film make clear, science relies on debate. If there's one scientist like Anthony Fauci, even if he wasn't lying, that just says my way or the highway, and we won't listen to other voices, science can progress. Sometimes scientists with fluky ideas, like Galileo or Copernicus, turn out to be right. So science relies on debate. So you can't have government scientists suppressing other science. That's one problem. Another problem really is that a lot of public health questions are not scientific in nature. They involve other issues. So there are economic questions, such as shutting down businesses. And if you look at it only through the lens of the virus, if you're willing to do everything, suppress people's human rights, suppress their individual rights, not care about business, then maybe the China thing where you lock everybody down and virtually imprison them in their homes makes sense. But really, there are trade-offs. And it's not the business of people who are only health scientists to make these political, economic decisions. That's why we elect presidents. And they have to make a choice balancing all these things, even putting lies, which I think are serious, aside. So it was not a good system. The system is problematic, and you see that in other areas of government too. Yes, you need scientists, but the scientists need to be open-minded, not suppress other views. I mean, let's not forget that the Jay Bhattacharya, who was then a Stanford professor, Martin Kulldorff, then a Harvard professor, and Sunetra Gupta, then an Oxford professor, in October, way after the data was there, put out the Great Barrington Declaration, advocating this focused protection I mentioned earlier, where you open the schools and let young people go about their lives and focus the lockdowns and restrictions on the older people who are most at risk. They came out with that. It was finally signed by over 1 million people, including Pulitzer Prize-winning scientists, but the government acted to suppress it. They called them fringe epidemiologists, even though they're from Harvard, Stanford, and Oxford. And Francis Collins, who was the head of the NIH, wrote to Anthony Fauci saying we need a devastating takedown of these people. They wanted to suppress the views, not debate them in an open debate and see what was the right way for America and the world to move forward. And in the end, we found through the Twitter files and lawsuits, and we have a journalist, David Zweig, who was there in Twitter headquarters as part of the Twitter files, that uncovered the government's active suppression of these views, labeling them misinformation and insisting that these social media sites take them down, or at least vaguely threatening them and essentially forcing them to take them down or deboost them or shadow ban them or whatever. I mean, years later, Mark Zuckerberg told Joe Rogan, when this clip is in our film, exactly what it was like when Facebook got these calls from the Biden administration. And he said that sometimes they were yelling at him. So when the government starts to interfere with freedom of speech, and especially the freedom of speech of scientists, a line has really been crossed. And so I think it's something we shouldn't forget.
No disrespect, but I think you're letting them off too easily.
Well, okay.
You're saying that they had a theory they believed in and they just suppressed other people. The issue that I have with that is that they knowingly were lying about their theory that they claim to have superior knowledge surrounding. And to me, that is unforgivable and deserves to be punished.
Well,
where's the accountability?
They certainly should be held accountable. You mentioned Rand Paul, and I know that he is still active in trying to hold Anthony Fauci accountable. I think just this week, there was more evidence of Fauci's suppression and more emails of his have come out. I totally think these people need to be held accountable. But I think that on one hand, it's not just that they were lying. I mean, it's not just corruption. It is corruption, but it's also a wrong approach to science and public health. So even if we got a more perfect Anthony Fauci in there, it would not be good. So, and it was not just Anthony Fauci. In a way, this was all left up to the states, and the states behave very differently. We contrast in our film the behavior of Florida, Governor DeSantis, and California, Governor Newsom. They behave differently, and the results are very different. Scott Atlas explains that now you can see the result. Now, years later, it's easy to look at what happened with the pandemic, because at the time, what's a COVID death? What's attributable to COVID? You die about anything, and they would call it a COVID death, and other people are complaining. But now you can look at simply excess deaths. How many more people died as a result of COVID than would ordinarily die? So it's a clear piece of data point. And if you look at excess deaths in California and Florida, age adjusted, they're roughly the same. So that all of the very intense restrictions of California did not save lives, but it did cost businesses closing, kids losing their years of schooling and falling behind, suicide rates shooting up, immeasurable harms that Florida avoided much of, and California did not, for no benefit. So I believe whatever you think Gavin Newsom's motives were, many governors did that, and many countries did that, and their people suffered.
Well, that's what I would like to uncover and get to, and that is exactly what were the motives. When we know that this virus was manufactured by man, that it was unleashed on man, and it resulted in consequences for the world that were not grounded in science, and we were intentionally lied to about it, that to me raises a significant question of what exactly were the motivations and who was behind them. I mean, I still wonder, and I don't even hear people really speculating about this. But was the release an accident, or was it intentional? And I think the lady that worked in that Wuhan lab that started to talk about it and suddenly disappeared, never to have been heard from since, may have had some insight into answering that question. What do you think?
Well, I believe that we have not gotten to the bottom of motives. We don't do that in our film. Our film tells the story of what happened and who did what, but not so much motives. Motives are tricky to find out and take a lot of time. I mean, I just saw a performance of Othello here in Washington, D.C., And the villain of that play, Iago, is famously someone whose motives are obscure. Samuel Taylor Coleridge called it motiveless malignancy, motiveless, but it wasn't really motiveless. He had so many motives were offered, the motives were unfathomable. Motives are hard to get to the bottom of, and it takes a lot of time. And motives are complex. There's often many of them. A lot of the actors in this film, in the COVID-19 lockdown story, I mean, there are many actors and their motives might have been different. I think Fauci, you are right to single him out. He is a particularly problematic actor, and I think it's great that Rand Paul is tireless in looking into it. I think that's heroic effort on Rand Paul's part. I think he is really to be commended. He has not given up when other people really would. He's been persistent. You're right. Anthony Fauci called him a liar during that testimony. I mean, he's had a lot of contentious testimony with Fauci, and he does not give up. He does not let Anthony Fauci off the hook, and it's a great story. So I do not think we've quite gotten to the bottom of it. Maybe we'll make an update to COVID dissidents when that information comes out.
I look at all the attendant circumstances, and I ask myself the question, who is capable of pulling something like this off? And what were the results of what they did? One undeniable result that we cannot really ignore was that Donald Trump was deprived of his second term. And I think that personally, because I've seen the evidence in Georgia, that the election was stolen. I think it was a coup d'etat. And I believe that the pandemic was the precursor and the excuse for putting drop boxes and millions of absentee ballots that nobody requested in mailboxes and all the other stuff that happened. Is that possible that this was a choreographed, planned event? I lean toward believing that. I'm a conspiratorialist, but I'm just looking at the evidence.
Well, I lean towards the belief that the Democrats have the "never let a crisis go to waste" slogan. I forget who coined it in the Clinton administration, but I think they recognized COVID gave them that option of mail-in ballots and circumventing really state legislatures and changing the voting processes, and they seized the moment.
That is certainly a plausible explanation.
And I believe that, I mean, I think Joe Biden, who campaigned from his basement and wasn't out there, could only have happened during COVID. I mean, so that is part of the tragedy. You never can tell, or it takes a long time to tell whether things are planned in advance. I don't really think people are really smart enough to plan that stuff in advance.
I was just going to make that observation. If it was planned, they are some of the most brilliant people on earth that really should be not writing documentaries, but should be writing mystery novels and films.
Well, that is right. I think it's pretty clever in a negative way, even what they did, if you think they simply seized the moment. I think to have completely circumvented the Constitution, really, in terms of avoiding the state legislatures and hundreds of years of tradition with mailing out these ballots willy-nilly, whether people asked for them or not. To have thought of all that, even at the time, is a kind of brilliance, you have to say.
It really, to me, has the fingerprints of the deep state written all over it. I know one. I'm sorry?
It does that.
Yeah, I know just one short anecdote. Brian Kemp in Georgia was starting to make noises like he was going to really seriously look into 2020. And a lot of people do speculate that this young man, Harrison Ponder, who worked for Kelly Loeffler in her U.S. Senate campaign and was on his way to a campaign event to actually see Michael Pence, was driving his automobile on I-16, and he had an accident, and he tragically lost his life, primarily because his car exploded. Two emergency responders showed up immediately, shortly thereafter, on the scene. Two of the people that responded were munitions experts, both with military backgrounds. The first one, when he first arrived, exclaimed, "This was not an automobile accident, this was an explosion." And a second one, when he started looking, said this wasn't just an explosion, it was C2 or C4. What is it? C4. And that obviously causes a lot of suspicion. In the case in Georgia that I was involved in of Jeffrey Sotier and Perdue, as in David Perdue against the Fulton Board of Elections, we had a judge in Henry County, Georgia, named Brian Amaro. We argued standing and venue. The lawyers in the case did. I played a supporting role. They argued standing and venue in the first week of the trial. Judge Amaro, without officially ruling, allowed the case to go forward for 9 months, implicitly saying that we were in the right venue and that we had standing. After having come to the English Street warehouse to personally look at where the absentee ballots were secured, ordered them to be held under a protective order, and ordered that the absentee ballots be unsealed and allow the petitioners to review them. So we really thought we had a good judge and we were going to get justice. Lo and behold, 9 months later, Judgey had an awakening and decided that we did not have standing, threw our case out, which was appealed all the way up to the Georgia Supreme Court, which reversed him unanimously and found that electors and candidates have standing. And then when the Supreme Court handed Judgey the football back, he said, "Oh no, I don't want that ball. Here, I recuse myself." I'm just telling you, you put all those facts together, it smells to high heavens. Something is not right. And this is my suspicion with a lot of circumstantial evidence, is that this came straight from the deep state, because I don't know how else you could conduct a campaign like the coronavirus and all the attendant circumstances and the suppression of free speech and the lockdowns without it having been some pretty powerful super authority, which is exactly what I think we're living with in this country right now. That is my firm belief, and I start with the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, which any living American today who's bothered to look knows that our own government killed the 35th president of the United States, and it's still being suppressed and covered up by the media, the mainstream media.
Well, it does take a long time for the facts to come out in these cases, a very long time. In the meantime, are we going to play our trailer? Let's do
do that now. Anthony, if you would. Obviously, Michael doesn't want to touch that deep state stuff.
Well,
he's got a wife and kids and a nice house he lives in. I'm just different. I'm 73 and what have I got to
but let's say this, John. I myself, as I mentioned in the first Trump administration, battled the deep state in my own agency, the U.S. Agency for Global Media, where Carrie Lake was for a while. I've had my own attacks. I mean, I've been attacked in the media many, many times. I've been personally sued, and I was sued as head of the agency and assailed by members of Congress. I mean, it's really, I don't feel I have not done my part in the battle against the deep state. So, but I am here to promote the film. So let's look at the trailer.
I fully understand. All right, Anthony, roll tape if you would, please.
Said, that's the problem. The people are not afraid enough. I said, it's unethical to use fear in an emergency to manipulate people.
We wrote this declaration with the hope of telling the world that the lockdown was the wrong strategy.
Collins saying, Jay Bhattacharya, we got to take them down. What scientists talk like that?
They're killing people.
high government officials, including inside the White House itself, would go to social media companies and threaten them.
Nice social media platform you got there. Shame if something happened to it.
We became more totalitarian.
If you don't have free speech, you cannot have science.
After watching the trailer, I'm intrigued. I can't wait to watch the documentary, but I don't know what other conclusion you can draw, frankly. I just I don't have another hypothesis to explain their behavior and what happened.
Well, that's right. I mean, it was a horrible situation, and we try to point to who is responsible and how it played out. And we just have to make sure we don't let that happen again. I mean, the government used a crisis to take away our liberties. Scott Atlas is very eloquent about that in the film. And we can't let them do that. There are our liberties. They don't come from government. We believe in the Declaration of Independence. It's the 250th anniversary. We believe these are our natural rights. They come from God. They don't come from government. Government's there to protect our rights. If they fail to protect our rights, we are obliged to protect them ourselves. And we need to be way more vigilant. Scott Atlas says, and I agree, that we kind of rolled over. They took away our freedom of speech. They took away freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. Churches were told to close, and they just closed. They didn't say no.
All of the things that we hold sacred, and we thought that were our absolute rights that could not be taken away from us.
That is right. They were taken away. And we have to make sure it doesn't happen again. We are not as jealous of our rights as we should be, even though we think we are. We think of ourselves as rugged individualists that are there to protect our rights. But we rolled over when the government told us to. As you say, when Anthony Fauci, said, do this, we did it. Everyone's got their favorite COVID story of stupid things they did. Jay tells the story, which we all remember. During COVID, to go to a restaurant, you had to put your mask on to sit down, take the mask off to eat, and put your mask on to leave, as if the virus knows when you're eating and would respect that.
Well, an additional example, to go to my own private club to which I had paid annual dues, they imposed a new criteria for my membership, and that is that I had to have a vaccine card in order to be admitted. It didn't feel right to me at the time. Now it just makes me mad as hell that I fell for it.
It's crazy. These private places like your club didn't have to do that, really. They could have stood up to the government. I mean, they might have had some problems, but they didn't. Everyone just sort of rolled over, and we just have to not do that next time. So that's the point of the film. I hope that your listeners watch it. It's, as we say, it's free, not behind the Wall Street Journal paywall. They can go to WSJ.com and search for it, or go to WSJ.com/opinion docs and see all three of our Wall Street Journal opinion docs, or go to our website, palladiumpictures.com, where they can find links to the Wall Street Journal films and our other films, including The Last 600 Meters, which you began this segment by talking about.
Fantastic. Michael Pack, the executive producer of Lockdown Dissidents. I don't know whether I want to watch it or not. I went to the doctor for my annual physical, and my blood pressure is perfect. And I just don't know whether I want to disrupt that or not. But I really appreciate the good work that you've done. And thank you for coming back on The Truth. And I hope this is the first of many more encounters that we'll have.
I hope so, too. Thank you, John.